We are unit 8.6, day 2. We are ready to complete the square. So taking all of those skills from day 1, okay, we're going to put it together to do this whole process from start to finish to solve for the roots of our quadratic functions by completing the square. Okay, so we're going to take square root property and our knowledge of perfect square trinomials. We're going to implement that formula of c equals b over 2 squared, and we're going to solve. All right, so we look at this current equation, and this is not a perfect square trinomial because my third term, this is not a perfect square. So what I'm going to do is move this to the other side of the equation, it's a 12, to get it out of my way, still keeping it in the problem, all right, but I want to be able to make a perfect square trinomial on the left. So now I'm going to leave a blank, okay, and we saw this in the day 1 video, the very last slide example that we did. We had blanks where we filled in a new c value. So we're going to find a new c value now. B over 2 squared. So 4 over 2 squared, well, that's just going to equal 4. So I'm going to put that into my equation here because I'm trying to make a perfect square trinomial on the left. Now, I have to make sure that I keep my problem balanced. So if I added a value to the left side of the equation, I also have to add it to the right. All right, so this is a very important step. Make sure that you keep it balanced. Right here, step 3. Okay, keep your equation balanced and add it to both sides. All right, so now we're going to do squared form. So this is going to become an x plus 2 squared. Remember, we half the middle term. So the middle term is 4. Half of that is 2. That's what we write in squared form. On the right side, I do 12 plus 4, and I get 16. Okay, from here, we're going to do square root property. This is what we were doing all of day 1, where we just square root both sides. Plus or minus 4. And now we make 2 equations. And we just found the 2 roots for this quadratic function where it would cross the x-axis at x equals 2 and x equals -6. Okay, so there are a lot of steps. This is the longest process of solving quadratic functions that we've had to do so far. Okay, it's going to take us a lot of practice to master this. There's a lot of places where we could go wrong. All right, so we look at our original equation. We're going to move c to the other side because this is not a perfect square. This does not help me. I'm getting rid of it. And I'm going to leave myself a blank for a new c value on both sides. Remember, we have to keep it balanced. All right, so b over 2 squared, -12 over 2 squared. I'm going to be adding a 36 on both sides. Right, because -12 divided by 2 is -6. Square that for a 36. All right, then we go to squared form. So half the middle term, half of 12 is 6, x minus 6 squared. Okay, on the right side, we're just simplifying. Negative 32 plus 36 is 4. Okay, and then from here, easy peasy square root property. Okay, and we get our 2 roots. Where does it cross the x-axis? At 8 and 4. All right, so these 2 examples have been nice because when we do our square root property, we get a perfect square over here. All right, we're going to look at some examples that are perhaps a little bit more messy and see, well, how do we simplify that? How do we deal with this? All right, so I'm looking at this example, and 4 is a perfect square that I currently have as my C value. But does it match the middle is what I have to determine. So the square root of 4 is 2, and then 2 times 2 equals 4, which is not 8. It does not match the middle term. So that means even though 4 is a perfect square, it's not the perfect square I need. So I'm getting rid of it, moving it to the other side. And I'm going to leave a blank for whatever perfect square value I do need, which I'm going to find by doing b over 2 squared. So negative 8 over 2 and square that. Okay, so negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Squared is 16. So I'm adding 16 to both sides. Now you should realize that your C value is always a plus. It's always a positive, because regardless if you square a negative or you square a positive number, it always comes out as a plus. All right, so your C value should always be a plus. So let's squared form this. Okay, so take half the middle term and plug it into squared form. All right, and we get 20 on the other side. Square root property. X minus 4 equals plus or minus, don't forget that, 20. 20 is not a perfect square, which means I have to simplify that. So I'm going to break it down. I can use square root of 4 and square root of 5. So this equals 2 square root of 5 already. So one first complication there. We have to get really good at simplifying those radicals. Okay, when I go to solve, these are not like terms. They're going to stay separate. Okay, so these are 2 real irrational roots, in case you were wondering. So this is the same thing as like the estimated on a graph. These are going to cross in between 2 whole numbers, because that square root of 5 is going to make for a really ugly, repeating decimal. And you're going to end up crossing in between 2 whole numbers. Okay, so no matter the method, we really come down to the same situations all the time. We end up with, 2 real rational, 1 real rational, 2 irrational, or 2 imaginary. It's a nice connection between all of our methods that we can relate them to one another. So we're going to try one more here. Okay, so the C value has already been moved to the other side of the equation for me. I know right off the bat that negative 306 is not a perfect square. Okay, so I'm going to set up with a space for the C value I'm going to find in just a moment. Okay, that was nice. One less step. I didn't have to move 306. All right, so my C value, I'm going to do it up top, I guess. B over 2 squared. So 18 over 2 squared. All right, 18 divided by 2 is 9. Square that is 81. So we're going to add 81 to both sides. And then we're going to squared form the left. Half the middle is 9. If you really need to, you can go ahead and big X and group that, but you better be quick about it because the problem is already a terribly long process. You don't want to add too many extra steps here. And then all I did was simplify on the right, negative 306 plus 81. Okay, and now we're going to square root property. So x plus 9 plus or minus. All right, what's doing with 225? Okay, so 225 is a perfect square. And there's a negative. So I would split negative 225 into negative 1 and 225. Okay, so the square root of negative 1 is I. We remember that. And 225 is 15. So that square root simplifies to be plus or minus 15i. So we do a positive 15i, and we do a negative 15i to solve these. All right, even though 15i is not under a radical, it is still not a like term because it has the I. So we're still keeping those separate when we solve. Okay, and those are our two roots. This is 2 imaginary because it has an I in it. Okay, you would have gotten a negative discriminant for this problem, and that means this does not cross the x-axis. All right, so we got a taste of each situation here. We had 2 real rational roots, we had some irrational, and now we have an imaginary example. Okay, so you do have each one of those situations to refer back to. Make sure that you represent all of those in your notes. Okay, if you're getting stuck on going into the squared form, I suggest taking all of those perfect square trinomials, okay, that go through these examples, write all of them down after we've added the C value, and factor each one of them using the big X and grouping. Okay, factor each one out the long way until you start to see the pattern and how we just jump right to that final answer without having to do the grouping. Okay, put the work in now to find yourself the shortcut so that then you can use that on the quiz and the test and save yourself those extra steps because you won't have the time to do it then. So we want to master it now. All right, so that is everything. Congratulations for finishing your first, set of examples here on completing the square. This is a very difficult topic. Okay, we're going to do a lot of practice with it. Please do not get discouraged. All right, just make sure that you're asking questions. All right, I will see you guys in class.